Welcome to third week. Probably starting to feel the strain, I bet. And again, a lot of you may be having trouble staying up with the third week if you haven't got enough practice in. Not to worry. This entire method is based on your own speed. Move at your own rate. But don't forget, if you take too long for this, none of the information will stick. So you got to adhere to a certain practice regimen. I suggest that by the third week, you can reduce the number of reps on your first scale study to say 5 reps at every fret instead of 20. Okay? And you can do the same thing with your A shape, which you learned last week. This week we're going to look at the C shape, or the C form, and we're going to start, it starts with our pinky on the A string, which is the 5th string. And it's going to start on the 5th fret. And there's a chord right there. Looks like a C chord in open position. Well, there's C chord in open position. We know that one. So if we use our last 3 fingers and use this finger as a nut or as a bar, move up to the 5th fret, here's C shape. See, it's out of its open position, and it's actually in the key of D, because this note right here on the A string is D. Now, how many people took that first test and filled in the fill-ins for the neck grid? The camera should be shaking. No, I didn't do it. Almost no one does that first test. Again, most of us are anxious to get started. So go back to the first test and figure out what the notes are on the bottom 3 strings. The reason for that is because those are the starting points for your scales, and they'll give you your key names, so you'll know what key you're in. Remember, it is position playing, but in order to know the key, you have to know the root point and the starting point for your scales and where the root point is in each of the chord scale shapes. That's what we're learning as we go. So, again, condensed information. I know it's a lot. Don't let your head explode, just practice. As you start seeing the stuff and start labeling it in your own mind, singing along with your scales, you'll start understanding what key you're in. So let's start with the, again, left-hand address. Make sure we're addressed properly. 4 fingers, 4 frets. Pinky, 4th finger. And this is a 1-octave scale form. The very first 2 you studied were 2 octaves apiece, or diatonic. So this is a monotonic or a single octave. Or is that unitonic? Nobody cares. Still using the same right hand technique. Okay, so let's try it with the metronome at 80 beats a minute. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, and play. Rest. That's better. Now move up a half step, or 1 fret. Now we're at D sharp, or E flat. By now you should understand what that is. If you haven't taken your first test and evaluated your musical information, you need to know about the nomenclature, what we call notes, what their letter names are, where their position is on the neck. And that's in your first test. Again, up a half step. I'm only doing 2 reps at each fret right now. Now we're going to keep that metronome going. I'll show you what it's like if we double that up. So we'll be playing 8th notes at 80 beats a minute. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and rest. Up a half step. Great. Now, if you've got that down, that's great. We want you to consider your next scale studies. Start playing them in 8th notes with your metronome setting between 60 and 90 beats a minute. You'll really start gaining some speed. You get more reps in if you play them 8th notes at 80 beats a minute than you would at quarter notes at 80 beats a minute. You get twice as many reps in the same amount of time. So again, as you speed up, you get a little bit more control, a little better technique to where you can really access your scales, because that's where you're going to be playing your single notes and your solos and your leads out of your scales, and they'll be based out of your chord shapes. So we'll have a study that comes along here in another few weeks that shows all that. And we'll start with our bar chords towards the end of the 10-week period. We'll take a look at that as a kind of a preview for the second 10 weeks. All right, so let's take a look at your next chord primers, which should be your second page. Chord primer number 2. It should start with a G chord, and it should be an 8-bar exercise. And it has repeats. Again, you go through the first part of it with quarter notes, then you repeat it second time, eighth notes. There's 3 exercises on page 2, and you'll see some modified chords. So I'm going to show you the modified chords that are on this page. Here's G, not modified, E minor. Well, we had E major, looks like this. It's 3 fingers. So E minor, you raise the index finger. That's an E minor. Now, if you don't know what these are, remember, you have a complete chord dictionary that's only 5 pages. It'll show you the 13 chords you'll have to memorize to play these 3 pages. Pretty much those 13 chords will get you around a lot of different songs. So by learning these song forms that we use as strumming exercises, you're actually learning some song forms right along with it. Plus, you're learning to modify certain major chords into either minors or dominant 7, which means you add the flat 7th note of the scale in with the rest of the triad or the chord itself, the major chord itself. All right, that's a little bit of information you'll be studying in the next couple of weeks. You'll want to take a look at reading chord symbols and the theory behind that. Very simple, 7 rules. Just go and take a look at it and read it this week. It's a good idea. All right, so here's G. And if we move to E minor, we can leave the second finger where it is and put the third finger right behind it. So there's no motion. If you start here and you have to move to E minor, you got to change your whole hand. This way you don't have to change your whole hand. Minimalized motion. G to E minor. Move these first 2 over here and bring the index finger down on the second string. Looks like an E chord, but it's moved over. It's now an A minor. And there's your root note is on the A string. A minor. Then to C, just put your third finger here. Back to A minor, then to D, here, and back to G, then back to D. So that's your exercise. Let's try it at 80 beats a minute. And 2, 2, 3, here we go, quarter notes. A minor, watch your left-hand address, don't stick your thumb over, don't squeeze too hard. A minor, D, 1 measure for each of these chords, G. You should be able to play along with me by this point. Repeat, play 8th notes. Go to the next exercise. When we get done here, go back to quarter notes. We should be on measure 9. It's a little number down there. 3rd staff. Sounds like the chorus from the previous verse there. Similar chords. Repeat. Some of you may recognize a few songs you've heard on the radio that fit right over this set of chords. Very common chord sequence or chord progression. Next exercise, quarter notes again. To A minor, D minor, looks like this. G. Back to E minor, very simple move. A minor. D7 is an upside down triangle. Looks like that. G7. There you go. C. You add the 7 with the pinky, C7. D minor, again, stretched out like that. G7, keep the index finger where it was. Quick change. C, A7. D minor, G7, C. That was a quickie. Okay, here we go. Gonna repeat it. Write your own song. Make up a melody. A7 with the pinky, D minor, G7, C, A7, D minor, G7, C. Okay, you practice those. That's going to be a real good thing for you to practice and get to motion through your chords. Make sure you make every transition nice and clean. Try to get it to sound kind of like my guitar did. You notice I went from the acoustic in the first week, and the second week I went back to the electric because it's a little easier for me to play and maybe a little easier for you to see the strings against the neck. I just wanted to be sure that you see you can play either guitar. It's the same technique. Acoustic or electric, it does not matter. It's still the neck of the guitar and it's still strumming the strings. Whether you have pickups or you have a sound hole or you have these F holes that you have like on this particular model. So I'll have a treat for you in the next week's study. I want you to take a look at your finger picking exercises. Kind of get prepared for that. Remember, you can use these chord primers as exercises for finger picking. We'll discuss that in week number 4. So practice your first 3 scale shapes and get the discrete scale shapes all the way up and down the neck, and practice your first 2 chord primers. That's what you're responsible for now. You're in week 3. So we'll look for you in week 4. Thanks a lot.